everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. Trying to make it sound all scary, just comes off creepy. Wrong kind of scary. I want to say thank you and welcome everybody to another installment, a new episode. I know everybody's been waiting. You guys have been out there just craving and wondering where in the hell the whole stories have been. I know everybody's wondering, but I'm here. I'm back. I'm back to tell you guys more stories. I took a little hiatus because as it always happens, life happened to me. And I thought that while I was kind of MIA, I was out hunting for stories. I was out braving the streets, the wilderness, the unknowns, if you will, to get you guys some brand new stories, some new interviews, some new content. And I think I succeeded. I'd like to think I did anyway. But for those of you that don't know, welcome to Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. And if you don't know and you're listening, you're in for a treat because you're about to listen to a paranormal podcast where we focus in on stories, mainly scary, creepy, really just the stuff we were told not to talk about from the experiences within the indigenous community. And more specifically, the reservation, or the res, as it's been called lately. Our whole lives. So come sit down with me by the glow of the fire as we share stories that our elders warned us not to tell. If you get a little scared, you can always scoot a little closer. Just make sure that it's still me that you're sitting next to. I want to say thank you again, and I want to thank everybody for their patience. I know it's been a while, and I know that I kind of dropped off the face of the earth. I've been dealing with a lot, but that's a more scary story because that's real life stuff. Don't get me wrong, the rest of this is real life. It's just life is scary all on its own. What I have for you guys today is a interview to talk about something that isn't talked about too much within our community, or at least not as associated with us as skinwalkers or even Bigfoot, which I would love to hear. And you guys have a Bigfoot story. Let's do that. And something I wanted to open up, I did a live on YouTube to kind of give that a shot. And I've been thinking about doing more lives, but I want to know if anybody's interested in theme shows. If you might want to hear us talk about a certain subject, and we talk about all the stories that are associated with that. Like today. Today we're going to focus in with an interview to a good friend of mine who actually grew up here within the native community that I grew up in, the indigenous community, sorry. His name is Larry Cesspooch. He's actually a director, producer, and storyteller here within the Uinta and Ore Reservation. And he runs a website called Through Native Eyes Productions, which you guys can check out, and I'm putting the links right here below. But let's hear a couple of stories from him, because I know that you guys have been craving those stories. I know you guys have been looking forward to hearing all the stories that we're collecting. So, with that being said, let's jump into this interview with Larry Cesspooch, and let's hear through his eyes about his experiences with the paranormal, the unexplained, UFOs. Take it away, guys. I'm joined today by Larry Cesspooch here on the Northern Ute Tribe. How you doing today, bud?
I'm all right.
I know you've been doing tribal stories and stuff like that, and right here on the show we talk a lot about, a lot of urban legends, myths, and stuff like that. I was just wanting to know if you had anything that you might find scary, some of your stories, or a personal experience per se.
Yeah. Well, I'm a filmmaker, and so that kind of takes me into all kinds of realms. And the tribe here, or the land and the people, have had all kinds of stories that deal with the land and different things that are among us. Just as there's good, there's bad, and all kinds of things. And so some of my filmmaking's taken me to tell some of those stories.
Is there anyone that's in particularly really scary? I mean, It's really interesting because I know I know I've gotten a chance to see some of your stuff, and I always enjoy watching the stuff that you do put out there that we get to listen and watch. So
Hmm. Yeah, I've had, I guess you'd call them encounters, as a language they use, pretty much all my life. One of the times that, and it's on my homepage, it's through nativeeyes.net, and it was an ARB that a friend of mine and I experienced. Well, there were about five other guys, but they've all moved away from Fort Duchesne, is where I grew up. And so we were all pals there and buds, and our parents had always told us and our elders to not go down at the river at night because there were those old spirits. Because Fort back in the day, there our people used to camp down on that river, and so there's spirits all down there. And so being just be, I guess we were about 12, 13. You think you know it all, and so one night we said, well, we're going to go down and see what's down there. So we made up some torches and put some um, kerosene, but uh, it wasn't gas either. I can't think of what it is.
sort of like lamp oil.
It's, no, oh, it was diesel.
Oh
Couldn't think of it because it burns a long time.
yeah,
Of course, it's black and dirty, but yeah, we put some diesel on our torches, and way back when was when the tribal jail used to be there in Fort Duchesne, and we started to go down towards the river there. There used to be an old footbridge that connected Fort Duchesne to the other side of the river because back in the day, that was one of the only bridges that went across the Uinta River there.
oh yeah,
And so we were going to go down there because we'd always go swimming, and we hung out at the river pretty much all the time. And so we had our torches and we started to go down off the hill there towards the river, and everything was all calm, and it was a good summer night. And the torches, a big wind came up and blew out our torches, and then we kind of freaked. Wow, that shouldn't have happened because the diesel is supposed to burn a long time. We soaked them pretty good,
yeah,
but they blew out, and so we were standing there trying to relight them, and then we seen an arb is the best way to call it. It wasn't really a light. It looked somewhat like a headlight, but it was back by the old tribal building or tribal jail is where it was. And we looked at it and we thought, oh crap, here comes the cops. You're going to come down and make us go home because we shouldn't be down here. And it started to come faster and faster. So we knew it wasn't a car because it was coming fast.
yeah.
And as it was getting closer, it got bigger and bigger. And we freaked out and we jumped to the side of a dugway that goes down to the footbridge. And we jumped on both sides of the dugway. And we watched this thing go by, and it got bigger. And as it went by, it took off up into the sky and kept going until it was about the size of, oh crap, I'd say, well, if you can imagine the moon, um, but a little bigger because the moon from where you are looking at it at Earth is so big.
Mm-hmm.
But this thing was bigger than that. But as it kept getting higher and moving away from us, it was getting smaller. but it was pretty big by the time it flew by us. It was probably about the size of um, a car or a truck, and kept getting bigger as it went past us. And so, uh, once it passed us, we looked at each other and we wondered what the heck it was, but we didn't stick around. And we there's a path we used to go through to go down to the footbridge that was off the main road, and we hauled butt through there, climbing over each other because we were so scared. And we ran home and ran in the house. My parents said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And we told them about what we'd seen. And we were told, "See, we told you not to go down there." And so my mom had to tell my grandma, and my grandma cussed me out too. And all the rest of the guys, I'm sure they got cussed out by their parents. And so we were in junior high back when we seen that. And when I was in high school, um, we were out partying with a bunch of guys, and we were coming around. We had been down to Randolette, and we were coming back around what they call Dead Man's Curve.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little ways from Fort Duchesne, probably maybe a mile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we come around there, and we're all laughing. And the driver, we start to come up. There's like a little dip, and you come up uh, from that dip, and you're heading towards Fort Duchesne. And he looks in his rear view mirror, and he says, "Oh crap!" And we thought again, "Oh man, here comes the cops." And here comes. We looked around to see, and there was this ball, but this ball was fire. You know, fire, a, a, a ball of fire,
Mm.
and it was small. But as it was getting closer, it was getting bigger, and we told him to punch it, and he's hauling butt up to towards Fort Duchesne. And this thing we thought was going to hit the back of the car because it was a Camaro and little back seat and all that sort of thing. We thought it was going to hit the trunk, but it just went right over us and continued to fly off. We could see it go over the water tower there in Fort Duchesne, and it kept going and disappeared once it got up there so far because you couldn't see it anymore. It was so small, disappeared.
Yeah.
So those were two encounters that I had here with some other guys.
This is Justin Levitt, aka Justin St. Native, coming at you from Scary Stories to Tell from the Res with Jordan Lone Bear, reminding y'all to keep it paranormal.
And another time was down in Moab. Um, Played football with Union, and they had their last game of the season down here against Moab. So we went out to party after and celebrate that the season was over. And so we got together with a few guys and got into a little Volkswagen Bug and bought a few couple cases and headed up towards Dead Man's. What do they call it? Dead Man's. It's out towards what they call the horseshoe.
Mm.
Um, and you turn off at Dead Man's. I'm sorry, not Dead Man's. Dead Horse.
Oh, okay.
Dead Horse. Um, Road, I guess it's called, and that goes on out to the horseshoe. That's the port of the river out there. And we probably went back into the canyon there about 10 miles, and we figure that was a safe place because we didn't see any cars coming or anything. So we pulled over to the side of the road, and under some cottonwood trees and started to uh, kick back and partying. There was about four of us in this little bug, plus a couple of cases of beer, and the formations of the arches down there in Moab, if you can imagine, if you haven't been there, they're pretty stoic as far as their formations. They're really cool.
Right.
And so I'm looking up at the horizon there. Of course, it's nighttime. It's probably about, oh, maybe 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I noticed these lights, and they were right on the edge of the horizon there. And but it was like a bubble. If you look at a bubble, it changes colors, and you can see through it. I could see the stars behind it, but the only thing that indicated there was anything there was these lights that are around the middle part of it. And it kind of changed shape. It wasn't really round, that would change to kind of an oval shape, and then it would um, go kind of round. So it wasn't really one shape in particular. It went from roundness to an oval shape. But the only way you could tell there was anything there was these lights,
Hmm.
and they didn't come off and on. They kind of just were. Um, there wasn't any kind of syncness to them. They were just come off and on, and they were all kind of a white pure light.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't different colors. And I'm checking this out, and I tell the other guys, look up there, check this out. And they looked up there to see, and they couldn't see anything. I said, wait, look at the lights, wait for the lights. And so the lights start coming on, and they seen what I seen. And back in those days, this was in the 60s,
Yeah.
uh, you had the old monster shows on TV, and they weren't anything like Star Wars, anything like this.
Yeah.
All of the old alien shows were they were going to kill you, and they were here for whatever reason. And so the first thing we thought is we better get the hell out of
Yeah. You
here.
got to run. You got to get out of there.
Yeah. So we threw our beer into the back of the bug, and we all hopped in and took off. And um, it came up every now and then as we started to go towards the main road, and would kind of like check out where we were. And once we got to the main road, it came out one more time and then shot up in the air, and that was the end of it. And
Wow.
oh, it was a number of years later, I would say, oh, about 8 years ago, maybe, or 10 years. No, it's got to be at least 20 years ago. Um, um, my daughters, they were in high school, and they wanted to go down to Moab and check out the arches. So we had a Ford Focus then, and started down towards Moab. And as we were getting close to the junction where you go off the interstate down towards Moab, our car went and died on us. And
Whoa.
luckily, we were able to pull off onto one of the off ramps there that led out to the flats there in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't figure out what's up with the car, and nothing's leaking. We didn't overheat. Nothing's going on there. And so, of course, back then we didn't have cell phones like we do now.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just call
And
AAA from.
right. right. And so we tried to, well, we seen this one truck that was out in the desert, and it was the only thing around that was coming. Of course, you've got traffic on the interstate, but this truck was coming up to where we were to get back on the freeway. And so we flagged it down, and there were a couple of guys who were out hunting dinosaur bones because I guess they get some uh, collectors that are after those things, so they
Mm,
get money for it.
wow.
And so they knew a little bit about more than I did about vehicles, and so they checked out the car, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong either. But they said, "Well, we'll give you a ride down to there's a store there at the junction that takes off down towards Moab."
Hmm.
And so we said, "Okay," and we got there, and we were able to. We had the phone booth then, and we called a wrecker to come. And it was a young guy, and he was a Hispanic guy, so he picked up our car and loaded it up, and we started heading down towards Moab. We were going down there to see a friend of ours, besides go down to the arches. And so, as we're going down, I'm telling my daughters about this story that we'd seen this UFO back in high school,
Yeah.
and that um, what I just told you about. And the record guy is listening pretty intently all this time.
Yeah.
And when I finished, he said, "Hey, you know what?" And we said, "What?" And he said, "My dad used to work out there, and I guess um, they were doing some of the tailings and stuff way back then, and with the uranium." And he said, "My dad told me about seeing those lights too." And
Wow.
it just kind of confirmed what we had experienced because there were about four of us guys, and confirmed that for my daughters. And so he said he was going to tell his dad and his family, so it would also confirm what your dad had had seen.
Yeah, I would imagine that
So,
was really big for him. I mean, to get confirmation for his dad. I mean, like you said, these stories, it's really interesting to hear these kind of stories just because, like you said, you don't know if you're the only one. Especially at that time, there wasn't a lot of talk about.
oh, sure.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of talk about how, like, oh, we saw this, we saw that, and it's like, oh, I saw this. It was one of those hush hush things. Like, you don't talk about it.
Yeah, back at that time, there were a bunch of UFOs around here. Oh, especially over here by La Pointe,
Mm-hmm.
and they were over. Seemed like they extract something from the red dirt. It was the same thing down in Moab. If you remember that red colored dirt
Yeah.
down there. And I think they extract something from that because they always hang out wherever that exists. But yeah, UFOs were pretty hot back in the 60s, sightings all over the place. But from that Moab experience, I pretty much accepted that they've allowed me to see them for a reason,
Mm-hmm.
or they've come to me for a reason. And so I'm a pipe carrier for our people here, our Ute people. And so when I load my pipe, I recognize the Creator and all the good spirits. And the last pipe full of tobacco I put in, last pinch of tobacco I put in for them,
Mm-hmm.
those things that are part of our universe and have come to understand them as just our brothers because the Creator made all things, made other planets and other people, and so I've come to recognize those as our relations. And so I respect them in that sense. They've come to me and allowed me to see what I have for a reason, and so I recognize them through that last pinch of tobacco I put in my pipe.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have ceremonies, I always acknowledge them because they're part of our universe. And same with them, just as there is human beings, there's good and bad and everything. And so I think I was allowed to see them for a reason. And so that's what I have to share today.
I want to say thank you again. I really I enjoyed hearing these stories because it adds to, like you said, it's an extra layer. My wife and I were just out looking at the hieroglyphs that are out here in the dinosaur
Hmm.
area, and we were looking really closely at them, and it was one of those things that makes you feel a certain, you want to know what it is that they're portraying that way, you know.
Right.
So, and it really made, that's why I said it made me wanted to reach out to you and to kind of hear your stories and everything that you have going on for you.
Hmm.
I want to say thank you again for taking the time to come out and tell your stories. If at any time you'd like to come on and talk a lot, and talk about whatever you got going on and stuff like that, I would be greatly honored to have you come on. And I know there's a lot of stories that you have. I know that you tell the Ute creation story,
Hmm.
and I'd love to kind of get that down sometime whenever you get a chance.
Sure. Sounds good.
So, but with that being said, I want to thank you again, Larry, for coming on to the show. And is so to find you and everything that you've been doing, and everything you've been up to. Do they just everybody just comes through nativeeyes.net, right?
You're right. Hmm.
All right, all right. Well, I hope to talk to you again soon, and hopefully you have a good day.
Yeah, for sure. Likewise.
Awesome. Uh, you have a good one, bud.
Uh, Okay. Catch you later, Jordan. Bye bye.
Thank you guys so much for that. Guys, talking to myself like we're a newscast. But before we get out of here, I want to end it with a couple of stories, both from one from my perspective and another that I found on TikTok from a TikToker who talked. I know that she's talked about. She's allowed me to have more stories, but I want to play this one specifically just because I feel like. Thanks for that. Thanks for that wonderful. All right. I want to say thank you to Larry again for coming on to the show. And we'll, like I said, we'll have his links and stuff down here in the description as well. Go check it out. I know that he's been busy. He's always really busy. And I'd love to have him on sometime again to tell creation stories or the stories that he has in his bag. Because storytelling is a huge part of our community and it's a way that we've tracked our history. So when I, I originally called him a tribal historian at the beginning, and he corrected me, but it's kind of a hard thing to differentiate. But that's just me. But before we go, I wanted to end it with a couple of stories, both one from me and from another one because I know that you guys have been aching. You guys are wanting to hear those juicy stories. So without further ado, let's jump into one story, and I hope you guys enjoy this one.
You can use that for your podcast. I'll also kind of give you a bonus and tell you one story that happened to myself because that happened to my brother. One day I was by myself in my parents' house, and my parents kind of live way out in the boonies, 40 minutes from the nearest township. And it is like pitch black outside. It's midnight. I'm just sitting around watching movies, of course, scary movies. And I'm just by myself and I'm chilling out. And all of a sudden the doorbell rings. And I'm like, nobody ever rings the doorbell. So I look outside because there's this big window that we have. And so I look out the window and I'm looking and there's nobody at the door. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I'm like, okay, you know what? Time to go to bed. So I go to my room and I had a TV in there. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch another movie in here. I start the movie and I'm watching, and then about maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, this is when I was a lot younger and I can stay up later, but 3 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden I hear walking down the hallway and I'm like, who's here? Because I didn't even hear the door open, the front door. And they're walking down the hallway, and they all of a sudden start rummaging through my dad's tool closet, which is like right outside my door. And so I'm kind of freaking out a little bit, and I'm looking over and under the door because you can usually see the hallway light in there. Nobody even turned the light on. Then whatever that thing was, it turns around and starts like jiggling the handle of my door. And my door is locked. It's got a hook lock on top, and then of course it's also locked from the inside. So I'm like, what? And I'm just like, so I get up in like the weirdest the weirdest move ever. I get up and I walk to the door, and I'm just standing in front of it watching this door handle jiggle, and I'm like, I open it, I'm almost like getting enough strength. Sorry, that was my water tank. Anyway, I'm almost getting enough bravery to open the door, but I just can't. So I go and I light some smudge, some sage, and I'm like, I got my feather, and I'm like whipping around, trying to end this, but it stops for a little bit. Then after about 5 or 10 minutes, it starts again. It starts rummaging through the closet, and then starts walking up and down the hallway. And literally nobody in my family has that walk, like you listen to people's walks, right? And this went on until I blasted the movie that I had on, and then just went under my covers and fell asleep, and woke up the next morning. So that was one of the stories.
Thank you so much for that. From a TikToker. The one tricky thing about this podcast is trying to figure out if you'd like to remain anonymous, because you guys can upload, you guys can send them to me and let me know, hey, I got a story I want to tell you, and you guys can tell me freely. And if you'd like to remain anonymous, I will respect that. So I didn't get permission whether or not to use her name, but I do have a few other stories of hers, so maybe we'll get a name. If not, oh well. Still pretty creepy though. It's always one thing to see disembodied some spirits or shadows and stuff like that, and the way they interact. I know that it'll lead right into the story that I wanted to tell, is that I've always experienced a huge level of paranormal events or activity. I know that my wife and I, we tend to see a lot of things that we call them peekaboos, is what we call them. They look around, and when you look at them, they just kind of look at you, or they'll dodge back in. So, and I've had a lot of experiences with those sort of things, and it sounds a lot like this thing was possibly maybe a disembodied spirit, something that knew her personally, or at least in that life. Who knows? It still is pretty creepy. If you guys have seen anything like that, let me know. Let me know what you guys think. I'm always wanting to know what you guys all out there are thinking, because your input could it could help us figure out what's going on. Now, I know I said I was going to tell one story, so I guess I'll tell a story in honor of Larry's stories about the UFO paranormal. I think that I'll tell the story, and I don't know if I've told it before on here, but growing up near the Skinwalker Ranch, actually 6 miles, I did the Google Maps thing and found out that it was 6 miles, not just a few. But I guess that depends on how you classify a few. Anyway, that's nitpicking. I actually grew up around that area, and like I said, I'd never heard of it before, so it wasn't a big deal. But as I got older, I started working around that area. Now, as Larry was talking about how he had seen orbs and lights in the sky, it wasn't too dissimilar from the things that I had seen. Because back in about 2018, 2019, I was working in the oil fields out in the Northern Ute Indian tribe oil field. And while I was there one night, it was a particularly cloudy night, very foggy, very hard to see things. Well, while I was working one night, mind you, the field that I'm working in is actually a stone's throw away from Skinwalker Ranch. It's basically the back of Skinwalker Ranch. While I was driving, my headlights had caught a reflection. It bounced off, it had bounced off of a tiny mirror. And stopped. I did the white people finger, the white people thing, and I stopped my vehicle and I got out of the car or the truck that I was driving. Now I had been up and down that hill. I'd been driving the oil field for years up to that point. Now I stopped. I got out and I'm trying to find it. I'm shining a light, my flashlight. I can't see it. I can't figure out what the heck it is. So I get back in my truck. I drive off. A little freaky, a little spooky. Nonetheless, throughout the rest of the night, I was actually trying to continue to see if I could find it or catch a glimpse, to no avail. Well, later on after this incident, as I was saying, the sky was very cloudy, very foggy. I was waiting to unload my load. I was a water hauler, a production water hauler. And while I was waiting in line, keep in mind, again, this is the night shift, I was looking up in the sky, as you do. And as I was staring at the sky, the clouds seemed to part. Now, when they parted, I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, the moon looks nice. So I started looking at the moon. And while I'm staring at the moon did this. It split. It went from one moon to two moons. And then below the two moons, another one split off to where there was three. Now I'm looking at three moons, three orbs, three light orbs. And as I'm staring at them, they started to rotate. They were rotating counterclockwise. And I'm staring at them. I'm mesmerized at this point because they're moving, they're rotating. And like everybody's story before, I went to grab my phone or camera and take a picture and record. And while I did, the clouds seemed to roll back over just enough. And by the time I had gotten my camera out to record it, the orbs had actually rejoined into one and the cloud cover had come back. So I had told my fellow coworkers that night, which spooked the hell out of them, and they no longer wanted to get out of their trucks for the rest of the night. So that's my paranormal UFO story that I'd seen, or at least one of them. I have, I think, a couple more. But what kind of paranormal UFO stories from the reservation do you guys have? I want to hear them. I'd love to hear all of those. But with that being said, I think that we've reached the end of our show tonight. I know we've had an amazing time. We've had a blast talking about stories, hearing these stories. But one thing that I forgot to comment on is our new logo. We have officially a new logo. And what do you guys think of the little icon down right here? The little icon right below the logo, Scary Stories Stuff. What do you guys think? I want your feedback. Let me know what you guys think. And you guys can submit your stories. Visit the Facebook page, Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. Facebook, you can find us on YouTube, Anchor, Spotify, currently right now. And show your support. You guys can also email your stories. You guys can actually find us on TikTok or follow my personal TikTok and send me stories through TikTok. You guys can record them and tag me in them. You guys can record them independently and email them to us at scaryresstories@gmail.com. But with that being said, guys, I think it's time we put out the campfire and we go home. I hope you all stay blessed, stay safe out there, but most importantly, guys, remember, stay scary. See you guys. Scary Stories to Tell from the Res is a Lone Bear production, with music provided by Pond 5 Media. Oh, you guys are still here. Well, congratulations, guys. It's announcement time. Ready? we now officially have merchandise. That's right. We now officially have our very first piece of merchandise, which is t-shirts. So if you would like to help support the podcast and show that you love scary stories to tell from the res, just visit twistedbearboutique.com. Click on the Scary Stories to Tell from the Res podcast tab, and you can order your very own Scary Stories to Tell from the Res t-shirt. And don't worry, there's more to come, guys. Have a good one.